First of all, Patrick, how are you?
Hi. Great.
Okay. Well, I'd like to start in the beginning.
Yeah.
Before we talk about
In
the new
the
record.
beginning.
There was a big bang.
4 billion years ago.
Gangster Politics. How good were they?
It was a great ska band. It was a really good band,
Yeah?
actually. Yeah, yeah. There's no real live versions of it. The band was amazing. It was great musicians. It was pretty great, actually.
What? Because as you say, it was a ska band. What kind of got you into that kind of music?
I came from a really small town. In fact, they were the first band I ever saw live because I was pretty sheltered in a small town. And someone was like, "Hey, you want to play in?" I'm like, "Hey, I'll play in a band." So it was kind of a bit like that.
Because you were, I believe, studying jazz and classical
Yeah.
piano. So was it a big kind of shift for you?
It was good for, it was actually good to know how to groove. It's good music to just practice on being part of like a band and being a unit in terms of like pocket.
Right.
So it's probably really good for that, where classical music would never teach you that, and neither would jazz. Jazz should teach you that, but modern jazz doesn't necessarily teach you how to just be really like a rhythmical unit and grooving. It teaches you more how to like improvise and like harmonically in school, but there's not enough emphasis on just groove,
Right.
which is, if I would say a flaw in my jazz schooling. But the band really helped for that. So like just being in a pocket and what that feels like in a pocket as a band. So
Was it the first band you were in?
yeah, it was the only band I ever saw
Okay.
before that too. I was like I grew up in like a small little town.
And then did you play shows?
Yeah, we played shows. It was
okay.
great. It was a great band. The
And-
bass player was crazy.
Okay. Well, what was the creative process like? And were you already creating your own?
They weren't allowed to let me sing. They would never let me sing, and they would never let me write because they
Okay.
thought I was fucking cheesy and ridiculous.
But you were quite young, right?
I would be like 16, 17,
Right.
and I was a bit cheesy and ridiculous back then. And so I wouldn't let myself sing either back then. And then I got older and I changed a lot musically, but it was great to do that. I was lucky to join that band, and it was like a really good musicians. Like it wasn't like just people learning how to play instruments. Most of them ended up being like one of them like a really renowned jazz player,
Okay.
and so it was kind of a lucky band to be in.
So it was a good learning process as
Yeah.
you were starting out as well.
Yeah, the drummer ended up in Jamaica. He produces dub records. The guitar player is my ex-guitar player, the guy, the same guitar player for
Oh,
years.
right.
So, and they're all like really close friends. Like we had great adventures together. So it's, for me, they're really close. The bass player I see all the time. He's an amazing bass player.
Well, you say your songs were a bit cheesy back then. You're creative.
A bit teenage angsty, kind of cheesy.
When did
Piano's a dangerous instrument.
when did the turnaround come for you? Where you kind of started more on the path you are on now?
I think when I discovered Debuse in Bjork, it was a very similar. I would think it was like, I was 17, 18. I was in classical school, and then when I heard, like, I remember just hearing Debussy, and then it gave me like loads of ideas. Because I was interested in doing electronic music. I didn't love what I heard. There's a couple artists I love, and then I was like, oh, how Debussy orchestrates, I could maybe learn from that and bring it to a modern way of thinking about things. He was very visual. Like, there's quotes of Debussy being like, he'd be doing these weird chromatic scales, and people would be like, what are you doing? And it's not musical. He goes, well, I'm imitating the carriage pass by. And it kind of just made me think differently about things. And I remember that sparking something, and then I started a different journey.
And do you remember the first song then that you wrote that you were proud of in that sense?
Yeah, I'm working on it. It's coming, I swear to God. I don't know. Let's think here. Waterproof 9 would be the first time I started getting something close in the book. And still I find it a little bit cheesy. But the Hurricane, I thought that tune was really cool because it was a really weird mix of things. And there's another one, the Dark Ick was kind of cool. That Waterproof 9, I started to find things that were interesting. I didn't have enough skills as an engineer because I was still engineering myself back then.
Right.
And I'm not a good singer yet back then. Like I didn't know how to sing properly yet, or like sing a song properly. It was too dramatic, or I was missing like, I didn't know how to do it just the way I wanted to do it. Now if I could take some of the musical things I did back then and put good vocals, it'd probably be pretty good.
Okay.
But that's about.
What changed this in your singing then? What kind of got you over the hump?
There's like this really fine line about being personal and too dramatic and dramatic. Like there's this line you need to walk, and when you walk the line really well,
Right.
so it doesn't feel self-absorbed. You know, like I feel like when I was younger, I'd sing and it would sound really self-absorbed, and it's annoying to listen to. there's a way of singing where it's just under that line is the best place to sing, and once you cross that line, it becomes annoying really quickly.
Is it easy to identify when you're writing a song where you are on that line?
Yeah, and sometimes it's good to write songs past that line for yourselves, and then you take just little parts of it and then you rewrite it.
All right. And well, you mentioned the visual qualities you saw in Debuse, was it?
Yeah.
What do you yourself have a visual connection to the music you make? Because
Absolutely, yes. Every time I do a new album, it comes mainly as, in general, like visually before musically. I was thinking a lot about Blade Runner in this record, and the kind of, I find the art direction in that film and the way it treats technology and artificial intelligence or any of those kind of topics, I don't find any other film has done as good a job as that, where it feels organic and real and romantic. So for me, if I wanted that Blade Runner, the Vangelis score, and that film for me was a big inspiration to figure out how to do this album that I wanted to do.
What thematically attracted you to Blade Runner?
I'm a sci-fi lover.
Okay.
Like, not sci-fi like Spaceship and Dragons kind of sci-fi, more, I like science fiction as a Trojan horse. It's like a Trojan horse for society. So like, for example, like you have a show like Star Trek,
right,
which is kind of like a cheesy soap opera. The writer hated it, but it was a way of approaching subjects that no other story could do at the time. So it has more first than any other TV show, right? It has the first interracial kiss, has the first black person ever on TV, it has a Russian and a Chinese person during the Cold War in the living room of the Midwest.
right.
And I like how science fiction allows people to explore things that they don't allow themselves in any other circumstance. So that attracts me to it.
Was this your approach then to the record, to the new record as well?
My initial approach, and then I got sidetracked. But you know, like look at the title. Like almost every one of my interviews, people are like, explain me the title, and then they said this like motion mechanic quote that they find, and they go crazy about it.
Right.
It's not meant to be taken that seriously, but but once you put it and you say the word robot, people allow themselves to think about themselves differently because because it's kind of silly. But really, it's not that silly. Like, I always give the example, like, okay, something weird happens to you and there's a yellow umbrella in the room. And 15 years later, you walk into a room and that yellow umbrella's there. You're going to feel this feeling and you don't know why. And then your memories are going to remember, and it's going to be in a little weird box, and you're going to feel weird. And you may not even know because it's a yellow umbrella.
Right.
So just by putting the word bloody robots in there, I could say something like that, and people are a bit more open to like be curious about it. Where like if this was an album that wasn't, if I didn't put, and I put like psychology, or like a weird thing like that, people would be like, oh, fucking boring, I'm not going to listen to a word. So science fiction will always act as a Trojan horse.
So in a sense, it's a way to intrigue or make something more accessible to people who would otherwise not be interested in.
Well, I think that's the nature of science fiction. But you have to also imagine that science fiction there's a big debate, like, did it invent our future or did it predict our future?
Right.
And that's a huge debate, right? Like, Asmaninoff, when he made the law of robotics, like there's lawyers now working on that law of robotics. Like, you have self-driving cars. If there's an accident in front of the car, and the car has to choose which way it goes, but both way it kills somebody, the robot has to legally choose who he's going to kill.
Right.
And how do you approach that in the law? So, as much as you could laugh at science fiction and be like, Asmaninoff Foundation as being some silly science fiction, he did all the preliminary work for what lawyers are really working on now.
Is this something you are generally interested in?
I love science.
But you mentioned, do you read those books and?
Not just those books, but I find even like the real science journals now are as weird as a science fiction novel. Like, the science we work on now is weirder than anything I keep on saying this, but I find that the science community is pushing more moral or more artistic boundaries than the artistic community does combined right now. Like when I read they had the idea of making a virus that genetically modifies the DNA of a mouse to stop in blue light. Lady Gaga doesn't seem very challenging to me anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like it's bubblegum. We're an artist's job to press buttons and make people feel new things. The artist community is losing that race dramatically. Like, I don't know any artist on this planet right now that makes me think outside the box like the science community does. I challenge the artistic community to show me a piece of music or a lyric or a poem that makes me feel as weird as reading what's happening in the real world.